Hello and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to share with you Ark's 10 best carnivores. But just before we get into it, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, as it really does help me out. In at number 10 is the Thyla. Now this thing is a very early addition to Ark, and this has been in Ark for absolutely ages, and it is a very well-known, really great carnivore among so many Ark players. And it isn't the hardest thing to tame, but it definitely will require some sort of skill. The Thylacoleo is a tame spawning in the redwoods that is just a very simple knockout one, but you'll probably want to use the net gun or a trap to actually have that full success, as when you don't build a trap for a tame, the actual success rate of the tame is rubbish. In terms of when it's tamed though, the Thyla is an extremely great tame, able to climb up vertical walls and surfaces, and also it does have a bleed ability as well, which is extremely great for a carnivore to have, and you will see that theme appear across the list of all of these creatures. A bleed ability is by far one of the best abilities a carnivore can truly have. It is by far one of the best things, as it works in damage percentage instead of just overall damage. So no matter the health of a creature, it will still deal 25% of their health, or whatever value the bleed ability affects, which again can be really OP, especially for bosses with a creature like the Deinonychus. In at number 9 is the RG. Yet again, another creature that has been in Ark pretty much right since the beginning, and it has had a model change since its release all the way back in 2015, but the new model is far superior than the old one, even though the old one does invoke a lot of nostalgia inside me. In terms of the RG's taming method, this thing is again a very basic knockout tame, just requiring a simple trap if you want that maximum success rate, and I think you can use the net gun as well. In terms of when it's tamed though, this thing has a wealth of really great abilities. Firstly, the Argentavis can pick up a wealth of creatures, which is extremely useful, especially with the Anki, as that is a metal harvesting machine. And getting onto its next use, this thing has weight reduction on things like metal, crystal and obsidian. Definitely all valuable resources that in your Ark journey you'll be gathering a lot of. Also, it has even more abilities on top of that. Its saddle acts as a portable smithy, and when it eats a dead body, its regen is absolutely insane. In at number 8 is the Baryonyx. Now, if you know me already, I always talk about the Baryonyx very fondly, and you'll probably struggle to see why I put this thing so far back on the list of the top 10 best Ark carnivores. And that is because the Baryonyx definitely still does have a very specific use case. And yes, overall it is still a very good carnivore with very reasonable health and a great damage stat, being able to take out alphas with absolute ease, and I have done it multiple times before. But in terms of their main use, these are still the caving kings of Ark, and caves are definitely an essential part of any Ark player's journey, as caves are essential on the maps that have them to actually beat the boss on the map, as the artifacts are required to summon bosses like the Broodmother, Mechapithecus or the Dragon, and then with those trophies from those bosses, then you can defeat the Overseer. The Baryonyx, like most other Ark creatures, is a very easy knockout tame, and you can just use the net gun or a simple trap. This thing will spawn in the swamp, so definitely look out for all of those creatures which will try and absolutely ravage the hell out of you. But once tamed, you've got yourself an absolutely insane carnivore. Like I've said, great damage, great health, great stamina, just overall a really great creature, which is the perfect size for doing any kind of caves. And it does have a special secret ability hidden up its sleeve as well. When C is pressed on your keyboard when you are under the water, the Baryonyx will do a spin attack, which will stun creatures up to the size of a Megalodon. Now, in terms of the Baryonyx's downsides, the only real downside is this thing will only eat fish. In at number 7 is the Deinonychus. This creature was first introduced on Valguero and definitely took multiple players by storm, and now the Deinonychus is one of the most essential carnivores for any Ark player's journey, especially on Valguero and especially for defeating bosses, as the Deinonychus has a wealth of tricks up its sleeve. Firstly, it can latch onto large creatures and literally rip them to shreds, dealing that all famous bleed ability. And unlike pretty much any Ark creature, this will also work on bosses as well, which is why this is one of the most insane creatures for doing bosses on Ark. And on top of that, they have the pack buff as well, and when you add mate boosts on top of that and the Uteranus buff that it will give the creatures in a fight, you can have yourself an absolute insane horde of boss creatures, dealing so much damage and tearing through bosses in literal minutes or seconds if you've got an absolutely insane army. But they aren't just great for bosses, they are great for many other things as well. The Deinonychus is extremely mobile and will not take any full damage at all, which is really a big relief to a lot of Ark players, as that's something that you don't have to worry about anymore. Also, they can scale walls and vertical surfaces, similarly to the Thyla or the Rock Drake, which is extremely useful as these things can traverse any landscape with absolute ease and defend themselves in any situation that you may come across. In at number 6 is the Carcharodontosaurus. Now, if you prefer the Giga, then just think of me talking about the Giga in this spot. But in my case, I vastly prefer the Carcharodontosaurus over the Giga in pretty much every way. There is basically no comparison for me. The Carcharodontosaurus is essentially the Giga, but everything that was wrong with the Giga is now fixed. The only thing is, it does do a little bit less damage at base, but with its all famous Blood Rage ability, it will be dealing more damage once you've just got it through a couple of creatures. The Carcharodontosaurus is by far one of the strongest dinos in Ark, and it has a very interesting taming method. Essentially what you'll need to do is drag dead bodies to it, and then it will eat those dead bodies, and then at some point you'll be able to ride it and then just decimate all the creatures into the area, and then when you reach 100% taming, you have yourself a Carcharodontosaurus. Seems very basic on paper, and actually the tame isn't too bad, requiring no tranks whatsoever, which is a relief compared to what the Giga tame is. Except obviously this is Ark, and Ark is a game of bugs and many other things, so sometimes this tame can go really wrong just due to bugs. Once tamed though, you have yourself basically one of the most powerful carnivores in the game, with absolutely insane health, no blood rage like the Giga, and also the bleed ability, which the tamed Giga does not have. In at number 5 is the Rock Drake. This was a creature introduced on Operation and is still so many people's favorite Ark tame. The Rock Drake is just so cool in its model design, and its usefulness is extremely well invited by the Ark community as well. And if you haven't tamed a Rock Drake yet, then head over to a map that has Rock Drakes. I think Crystal Isles has Rock Drakes, and Fjorda definitely has those too, as Fjorda just seems to have literally every Ark creature just thrown into one map. Fjorda is definitely a great map, and one you should check out if you haven't already. It is free, so you will not have to pay for it. The Rock Drake, unlike many other creatures, has a very interesting taming method. Essentially, you'll need to steal the Rock Drake egg and then raise it as your own. And please use air conditioning for this. Do not use torches, as the temperature is so out of the range of torches. You would need so many of those things. It is not worth using them. And obviously the taming method of the Rock Drake is very similar to the Wyvern. It's pretty much the same thing overall. You just go to the kind of trench area where their eggs are, and then you steal one and get out, except on Operation it is significantly harder, as no flyers are allowed on that map. But it is much easier if you do have a lower level Rock Drake already, or just a Rock Drake available to you. Once tamed, you have yourself a really fast Ark glider, capable of a lot of damage. and unlike many other flyers, this thing has really incredible stamina and so little stamina drain, which is really important if you're flying over really long distances. And on top of that, on Arboration, this is a creature which can absolutely cheese the final boss. In at number 4 is the Wyvern. Now, like I said before, the Wyvern is tamed in the exact same way as a Rock Drake, except these things are significantly easier to tame than the Rock Drake, and you can use torches to raise these things as well, as the temperature isn't so outside of what torches are capable of. So overall, the Wyvern is a much easier tame than the Rock Drake, and overall it is just a more accessible creature to many people, as they may not even have the skills, or at that point in time they may not have the resources to tame themselves a Rock Drake. A Wyvern is a good shout if you do want to practice for that Rock Drake tame that you may want to do in future. And if you are going for a Wyvern, I would definitely recommend the Lightning one, as the Lightning Wyvern in my opinion is by far the best, as its lightning ability deals torpor, which can be extremely useful in many combat situations, and compared to other Wyverns it just has really great accuracy and it deals a significant amount of damage. Also, Wyverns are very good harvesters as well, as when you're on the ground, if you press C, their wings will flap and you can gather a very decent amount of wood. Top tip for you there if you didn't know that. Also, like many other flyers similarly to the RG, the Wyvern can pick up a wealth of creatures as well, although I don't know if it can pick up the same amount of creatures as the RG, but pretty much every creature that the RG can carry, the Wyvern can carry. And the Wyvern is significantly faster than the RG. The only real downsides to it is its turning circle is pretty rubbish. In at number 3 is the Crystal Wyvern. Now you may be thinking, why am I putting these things above the Wyvern? The Wyvern is just objectively a much better creature. Well, the main reason for that is the Crystal Wyvern is so much easier to tame than any Wyvern ever could. These things are a passive tame requiring Crystal Isle Crystal. I can't actually quite remember that, but it isn't just normal resource crystal. But the taming is even easier than that. There is a point on the Crystal Wyvern's back where you can simply sit and wait for 20 minutes, and over that period of time you'll feed it that crystal, and then you'll have yourself a Wyvern. You don't even really have to do anything apart from press one button over a short period of time. Really easy and great tame, and it can literally be your first tame on the map, as obviously Wyverns do not have saddle requirements, meaning that there isn't a level requirement to get one. These things are even easier to tame than a Pteranodon, and significantly better, as their damage dealing is so much higher, they are faster than a Pteranodon, and just pretty much in every way they are better than the Pteranodon. Better stamina, better weight, they can pick up more things, they can harvest more things, especially if you're getting the Blood Crystal Wyvern. You have yourself a really great steal, and you should be proud of that Crystal Wyvern tame, even more so than a Wyvern tame, as these things are very easy to tame and extremely useful. In at number 2 is the Maywing. Now most people think the Maywing is a herbivore, but in fact this thing does eat meat, and to tame it you need meat. Overall, the Maywing does have a pretty bland taming method, just being a very simple knockout one. What a shame, wildcard. But either way, this thing really isn't that bad with the likes of the net gun or just some signposts. These are by far some of the easiest tames to actually get in Ark, and there'll be no struggle at all as long as you carry the right gear with you, as if you do this without a trap they can be a bit of a pain, but it can still be done thanks to you having the tech suit on Gen 2. But if you are taming these things on Fjorda, definitely build a trap, and even on Gen 2 I would still very much recommend that. Once tamed, you have yourself a really insane travel mount, probably the best in the game just by far. Yes, the Rock Drake is going to deal that damage, but the Maywing is significantly faster. Also, these things are really great for raising babies, as they work as a portable feeding trough, and you can even steal enemy creatures with these things, which is a nice, cool, neat little feature for you PvP players. And if you're short on a berry gatherer, these things can gather berries as well, even though they are carnivorous. And in at number 1 is the Shadow Mane. Now this is by far one of Ark's most popular carnivores, and is probably just the go-to overall. It is an absolutely insane boss creature. It's great for travel. It's just great for every single task in Ark, apart from gathering berries, as sadly, unlike the Maywing, this thing it cannot gather those berries, and obviously it's not going to be great for raising creatures, but still, for everything else, you can essentially just have a Maywing and a Shadow Mane, and you can do any task in Ark. The Shadow Mane has a wealth of abilities, including a really high jump. It also has the hydration buff, which only it and the Spino share as far as my knowledge, and also it has pack buffs as well, as when these things are in a pack they're even more overpowered, and they are really great swimmers as well, and they can even charge up their damage over a short period of time. The only real downside is the taming method for these things is really annoying, but actually overall it's not the worst thing you'll see, unlike what the Hesperornis is. That tame will forever haunt me. Ark's 10 best fantasy creatures. In at number 10 is the Basilisk. The Basilisk came out when Arboration released, and this really was a great creature among many people. And also the Basilisk is just a very popular creature overall, as it is very well known from movies like Harry Potter. In terms of its use in Ark, the Basilisk is extremely useful at dealing all of that necessary damage. And also its second ability does deal torpor as well, but I doubt you would knock out any creatures with it, as I'm pretty sure the damage it deals is pretty substantial. Also, on top of all of that, the Basilisk has a wealth of other abilities as well, like being able to bury itself underground, so you can easily hide your Basilisk somewhere in a PvP scenario, or if you just want to hide some loot, you can always hide some in a Basilisk under the ground and keep it in a very high density foliaged area. This thing will be really great for hiding all of those resources that you desire and need to keep so much. In at number 9 is the Astrocetus. Yet again, another fantasy creature that Ark has somewhat made up. And Astrocetus actually means space whale, and that description really does sum it up perfectly, as this thing literally is a whale that lives in space, at least in Genesis Part 1. On maps like Fjorda, that rule kind of gets broken a bit, and as you can see here, I'm not in space when using this thing. The Astrocetus is an extremely good PvP creature though, having a wealth of abilities like being able to bomb, and also having a wealth of camera angles around. And this thing also does have a wealth of abilities, which over time you will gradually learn how to use. And this thing deals an insane amount of damage as well with all of its abilities. The only thing is, obviously, this thing is a bit on the slow side, and it can be very awkward to tame, but with things like the Tech Hoverskift, the Astrocetus tame actually isn't all that bad. In at number 8 is the Astrodelphis. Yet again another space creature, this creature meaning space dolphin instead of space whale. And overall I would say this creature is a lot more useful, as again it is great for PvP scenarios with aerial dogfights, and this thing can shoot a wealth of lasers out of it using element for that. But you may think that is really expensive, but trust me, Genesis Part 2 and element really aren't a problem. Genesis Part 2 is by far the best map for farming element. Element simply is not a difficult resource to acquire anymore. But in terms of its general use, the Astrodelphis is an extremely useful creature for traversing any Ark map. This thing can zip across any Ark map, as you can see right here, obviously using element as the fuel there. But also the thing is, with this saddle, is that it is unlocked at a very high level. I think it's 115 or 120, meaning you will need to transfer your character over maps to actually reach that level, which means the saddle for this thing actually can be incredibly hard to get. But it is 100% worth it, as this thing is extremely useful for missions on Genesis Part 2, and it is just an extremely useful creature to have and use overall in your Ark gaming. In at number 7 is the Snow Owl. Now this thing was first introduced on Extinction, but now can be found on maps like Fjorda, and because of that, this thing is accessible to every Ark player apart from mobile players, I think, and I don't know if Switch players have access to Fjorda, but most Ark players will have access to this thing. And what a great creature the Snow Owl is. Firstly, this thing has the gliding ability, which it shares with the Griffin, except this thing has been much better implemented into the actual creature's design. It feels so much smoother and snappier with the glide on the Snow Owl compared to on the Griffin. Also, in terms of its PvP use, this thing has a wealth of abilities for it as well. Firstly, it has this kind of heat seeking ability where you can seek out any Ark creature or organism that gives out any kind of heat, which can be extremely useful if you're trying to track down that annoying player that has just tried to raid your base and is trying to get away, or is just trying to get into your base in the first place. And if they're hidden away, you can simply turn this ability on and you can see right through objects and just see that player standing right there. You will also want to level up stamina as well, as that will be able to use the healing ability on the Snow Owl, which is one of its most useful features. But it does have a slight handicap though, as this will heal every single type of creature in its healing radius, that being enemy or wild creatures or your own tamed creatures. But that could work in your favour if you're trying to quickly heal a wild creature that you are trying to knock out. In at number 6 is the Reaper, and what a creature the Reaper is. This thing is by far one of the best Ark creatures in the game, and is a really useful and interesting tame to actually acquire. You will need to get impregnated by a Reaper Queen and raise your own Reaper King from scratch. Right from the start, you have to raise this thing, and also if you want to get that 100% effectiveness, make sure to get all of that XP while the baby is still inside of you. And this really is not an easy task. Firstly, you'll need to get the Reaper Queen to a really low health stat. I think it's under 1000 HP. Then you go up to it and it will impregnate you, and then you'll need to gather all of that XP to get yourself maximum effectiveness. Yes, it isn't necessary, but if you're going through all of this effort to get into it, you might as well. And at the stage of the game, when you're actually going to be getting one of these things, unless you're on Gen 2, you really do have the time and the access to get all of that XP. And once you have done that, this is an insane creature which really will take you far in all of Ark. The Reaper really is an insanely strong creature that can smash through any creature that may face you. It is probably even more powerful than the Giga when put to good use. In at number 5 is the Bloodstalker, and what an absolutely insane creature this is. This is probably the best creature out there for travel besides a creature that is further on in the list. The Bloodstalker can simply zip across the general Ark map, and it travels at such immense speeds. Once actually controlled properly, there is pretty much no match to it. Also, the Bloodstalker is great in water as well, being able to skim across the surface of any body of water, and just being a generally great swimmer as well, which is an extremely useful feature to have, especially on a travel mount, as there is no environment that the Bloodstalker can't go in effectively and go through quickly and easily. Obviously, once you know how to control this thing properly. And once controlled properly, unlike how I control it, because I'm really not that great when controlling the Bloodstalker, you have yourself an insanely good travel mount that is great for gathering many hexagons across Genesis Part 1, as many missions will require that Bloodstalker to be used to gather all of those hexagons. For example, the Bog Race mission on Genesis Part 1 in the Bog Biome requires a Bloodstalker to be used to race across the Ark map to be able to finish the race in time, and it will get you through a series of loops across the Bog map on Genesis Part 1, and once done properly, it is a really fun mission to do, and also it is extremely rewarding as well, as the amount of hexagons you get and also the amount of enjoyment you get from controlling this thing is immense. In at number 4 is the Crystal Wyverns. Now you may think, why are these things so high on the list? Well, the main reason why they are so high on this list is these things are a really easy tame, and definitely one worth taming, as pretty much every Ark player has access to Crystal Isles. The Crystal Wyvern, unlike the normal Wyvern, is an extremely easy tame, just requiring a passive tame with you feeding it crystal. And there's a spot on its back where you can stand, where you can just simply press a button over a period of about 10 to 20 minutes, and then you have yourself a literal Wyvern. It can literally be your first tame on the map. What an insane thing to have. And especially if you tame a Blood Crystal Wyvern, you have yourself one of the best creatures on that map, and also one of Ark's best creatures overall, as these things are great for carrying a wealth of creatures around the map. These things also just are great for flying across the map as well, and they are reasonably good for metal runs too, and their damage isn't that bad as well. And with the Blood Wyverns, they can also suck blood out of other creatures, and I think that will regen them, or it will just rip loads and loads of health out of the creature that you're attacking. Definitely, if you can at some point tame yourself some Crystal Wyverns, they are ridiculously easy to do and 100% worth your time. In at number 3 is the Rock Drake. Yet again, another aberration creature commonly associated with the Reaper. These two creatures really are the dominance of that map, and just some of the dominance of Ark in general. These things are both really insane creatures, but the Rock Drake, in my opinion, is far superior to the Reaper, as it can travel significantly faster, and it is really great for cheesing Rockwell on Aberration, which really means this thing is by far one of the most useful creatures on that map. And it is great for so many other maps as well, as it is a really quick travel mount that can deal a wealth of damage and also has a wealth of abilities. The Rock Drake can go invisible and can easily latch onto pretty much any surface. It's like the Thyla on so many steroids, and its stamina really is not an issue either. You will basically never run out of stamina on this thing. I barely ever run out of stamina on a Rock Drake. Their stamina drain is pretty much nothing. You'll be totally fine with it. And their weight is pretty decent as well, so you should have no concerns for any of those features. But also, in terms of the Rock Drake's damage, this thing really does pack a punch, which makes this thing also a very extremely useful travel mount, as sometimes travel mounts are good at the actual traveling, but they're not good at actually defending themselves during that travel, as when you're traveling across the Ark map, you'll probably run into several hostile creatures, so being able to defend against them is an extremely useful skill, which luckily the Rock Drake does very well. In at number 2 is the Maywing. This creature is yet again another Genesis Ark creature, but this time being found in Genesis Part 2 instead of Genesis Part 1. And what a creature the Maywing is. This thing has a wealth of really solid abilities, which makes this thing one of the best creatures in Ark in general. If ever I'm traveling around the Ark map, I will always, when applicable, use the Maywing. Obviously, sometimes it isn't, as you'll have to gain so much elevation, and the Maywing isn't so great at that as it is at going down. This thing is great at gliding down from a height to a lower height, but it isn't the best at going up to higher heights, and unlike the Rock Drake, this can't really grip onto surfaces and things like that, but compared to the Rock Drake, it is a significantly faster glider. But also, apart from that, it does have a wealth of other abilities as well. Namely, this thing is really good at raising babies, and it is essentially a portable feeding trough that is literally infinite. And you can even steal baby creatures with the Maywing as well. This is a truly great creature that every Ark player should tame, and also if you're looking for some berries, this thing will gather that too. And finally, in at number 1 is the Shadowmane. This is by far one of Ark's most recognizable creatures now. The Shadowmane is just so widely used after its release in Genesis Part 2. especially that now this thing is on pre-order, so it is accessible to the general Ark player, apart from Switch players and obviously mobile players. But I doubt mobile players are ever going to see the Shadowmane actually come to their platform, but the Switch, obviously, there is hope now. In terms of the Shadowmane's abilities, this thing can jump great heights and also can just leap pretty much anywhere over really long distances, which can be great if you're trying to catch someone in the sky out of the air and pull them back down. If you're in the sky, you are not safe from the Shadowmane. They also have the hydration buff as well, alpha buffs, pack buffs. They basically have every single buff that you could think of, and they're really good in the water as well. And on top of all of that, they're fast, they're quick, they do so much melee damage. It is absolutely insane. They are by far some of Ark's best creatures out there. But anyway, that is the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Also consider joining this channel's membership. It is only 99p. But with that, I will see you all in the next one. Bye.